admirable. For example, if you're in a neighborhood where the school consistently performs at an F level, and you don't have the means to get out of that situation, we have these scholarships, as we call them in the state of Florida, that are corporate tax credits that enable those children to be able to choose a private school. And I think that's a good idea. Now, what I oppose is the expansion of these types of programs so that the people that qualify for them basically become middle class and upper class individuals. That's probably not a good idea. That probably gets beyond the concept of allowing these impoverished children who can't otherwise choose to be able to choose any school they wish.
So you're saying that as a way out of a poorly performing public school, some choices in private schools would be a good idea?
That's what we have right now, and I support that concept, yes.
Well, moving on a little bit from education, I've got a few more questions. I guess one of the big things that everybody wants to talk about right now is the health care bill coming down from the federal government. What the Florida legislature is going to do with that and how they're going to challenge that. So the question is, are there certain things that you will challenge in as a member of Congress on constitutional grounds, and what would they be?
Well, I know, Kristi, that you're astute enough about politics. You mentioned that as a member of Congress, you know I'm running for the Florida State Senate. And I know you know that. But this national health care law, okay, which was enacted in the spring from Washington, is going to impose huge financial burdens on the states. And the reason that's going to occur is because in 2014, there's going to be an expansion of the criteria for Medicaid. That threshold is going to rise to 130% of the poverty level. So there's going to be millions of new people that are going to be eligible for Medicaid nationwide, and about 1 million new enrollees in the state of Florida. Now, for the listeners to the show, for the viewers, Medicaid is an entitlement program. It's health care for the poor. So the cost of that is shared between the state and the federal government. Right now, Florida pays about 45% of the cost of Medicaid. The federal government pays about 55%. Well, in 2014, there's going to be 1 million new folks here in Florida enrolled in Medicaid. Right now, Medicaid is just over a quarter of our budget. It's the biggest piece of our budget by far, right around 26%. It's going to be a huge problem. We don't have the money in the state of Florida to pay for this. I don't think our federal government has the money to pay for this. So even if we get assistance from the federal government in the first few years, which has been proposed to pay for these new Medicaid enrollees, it's still just borrowed money making a pass through Washington, D.C. It's going to be a huge, huge problem, particularly in 2014 and beyond. We simply are not going to be able to afford that in the state of Florida. I would support anything we could do to help that or undo parts of that legislation that cause this type of undue burden on taxpayers.
Do you support the Attorney General's lawsuit against the federal government telling them that Florida doesn't want the health care bill in Florida?
Yes, I do. That lawsuit filed by Attorney General McCollum and several other states is an attempt to, will ultimately probably be decided by our Supreme Court, saying that, in the state of Florida, you cannot mandate that our citizens in the state of Florida purchase a product, health insurance. And so that's the premise and the argument behind that lawsuit. And I support that because it gets back to not only that argument, but we simply cannot afford this plan, and it's going to be a huge, huge burden for Florida's taxpayers.
We've talked a little bit about your opponent, and having been in the political realm a little bit, I have personally heard him say that any of his political opposition is his enemy. Being less than a week out of the primary and knowing that we would like to see some new blood in office, do you agree with that statement? Is your opponent your enemy, and is he forever?
Well, if you recall, my opponent not only serves in this seat for the last year, he won the special election for the state senate in District 8, but he also serves as the chairman of the Republican Party of Florida. And I guess there was some turmoil there, and he was elected into that post in early 2010. But when he was elected into that post, he said and was quoted in many newspapers and in the media that, you know, our enemies are the liberal media and the Democrats. Okay, that's what he said at that time. And he was a state senator at that time in District 8. He had been elected, and at that time was representing 100,000 Democratic constituents in Senate District 8. You know, so essentially you're calling 100,000 of your constituents the enemy. See, and I don't think we can approach things like this. He's already been elected. He's representing all of those folks, both Democrats and Republicans. And, you know, some Democrats have good ideas. And
Dave.
I hope
yeah.
so. Well, he should be representing all those people.
Representing all the citizens. So I think that was just a poor choice of words. I think that, you know, there are times when you have to reach across the aisle. Sure, we have fundamental philosophical differences in our views. And some persons in both parties are out on the fringe, and maybe you can never reconcile that. But there are times where you have to reach across the aisle, and I'm going to tell you that's particularly important in Northeast Florida, because we have issues here that we have to deal with, like our river and some other things, and we're going to be going against powerful lawmakers in South Florida. So we have to make sure that we speak with one voice from North Florida, and sometimes that requires reaching across the aisle.
So not enemies.
Not
We need
enemies,
to know
no.
when
The
to work
political
together.
debate
Yeah.
doesn't need to go there,
Yeah.
I don't think. You mentioned the river, and how about the environment and generally? Where do you stand on issues? And I think you're concerned about the river itself, aren't you?
Yeah, I think most of us here in Northeast Florida are concerned about the St. Johns River. Of course, that's our river. You know, it affects just about every county in this district. It touches every county. And what happens south of here, Dave, you know, as far as industrial dumping and the waste management and things that happen south of here, which is really upstream of the St. Johns River, is really what's causing our problems here. We get nitrogen and phosphorus in the river, and too much of that, and then we get the algae and the fish kills here in Northeast Florida. So this is one of the things that you do have to have some type of statewide regulation. This is not something you can regulate here in St. John's, here in Duval County or St. Johns County. These types of issues do need statewide management, and the river's we're going to have to do things better with our river. We're going to have to look at, you know, these industries that are dumping, and they have, you know, the ability to do this, but maybe they're exceeding their limits on the dumping, and be more diligent about prosecuting them. We may need, I hate to raise this, but it's possible we may need additional regulation to keep that river clean. And the one thing we have to make sure doesn't happen is, you know, Central Florida wants to tap our river for drinking water and irrigation and some of those things. And if they're going to pull a lot of water out of this river upstream where it's nice and clean, we're going to have a more polluted river down here. So we have got to fight that as the delegation from Northeast Florida. We cannot let the folks in Central Florida take good water, clean water from our river so that we get the more polluted water downstream here.
Right. Well, I think in every area, there are a lot of developers that want to keep the ball rolling in terms of development and residential growth, business growth in those areas. I mean, we're doing it here in Duval, too, right here at the mouth of the river. So, as you say, it takes a statewide approach. You know, we can't merely advocate for our own interests in one county or another, but take care of the river by all working together for that. And like watering regulations, I'm allowed 2 days a week before 10 and after 4 to water. And I think residential runoff is a factor too, but and I'm willing to put up with those restrictions. I don't want to see the water police come around and try to get revenue from me by, you know, enforcing all of this very, very strictly. But I think people are willing to put up with that. But what about Georgia Pacific and some of the larger corporations that, as you say, you know, they have certain limits of what they're allowed to put in the river, and we find that there are excesses and kind of loopholes that circumvent those restrictions. I think it takes